8 tons of muscle, tusks, and rage charging directly at you. You have a sharpened stick. That's it. That's the entire matchup. And somehow, your ancestors won this fight often enough that mammoth bones show up at hundreds of ancient campsites across the world. So how did a group of humans, armed with nothing but wood and stone, take down an animal that outweighed them by 100 times? The first thing to understand is that nobody fought a mammoth head-on. That would have been suicide, not strategy. Archaeologist Gary Haynes, who has spent decades studying mammoth kill sites, argues that successful mammoth hunts depended almost entirely on exploiting weakness, not brute force. Hunters targeted the young, the old, the sick, and the injured. A healthy adult mammoth in its prime was rarely worth the risk, but a mammoth separated from its herd, weakened by age, or already struggling in deep mud or snow, became a viable target. This wasn't cowardice. This was survival math. Every hunt that failed could mean death or crippling injury, and a crippling injury in the ancient world was often a death sentence delivered slowly. The goal was never a fair fight. The goal was overwhelming advantage. Terrain itself was a weapon. Evidence from multiple mammoth kill sites, including several in North America, shows animals driven into natural traps, bogs, ravines, narrow canyons, or soft mud where their massive weight worked against them instead of for them. A mammoth stuck in mud up to its knees was no longer 8 tons of unstoppable force. It was a stationary target. Archaeologist Daniel Fisher has documented evidence at multiple sites suggesting hunters specifically exploited these environmental traps, sometimes possibly even driving animals toward them deliberately using fire, noise, or coordinated group movement. This required something crucial: cooperation on a scale most predators never achieve. A single hunter with a spear stood no chance, but a coordinated group, moving with practiced roles, communicating through gesture and shouted signals, created something far more dangerous than any individual weapon. Some hunters would have taken the role of drivers, using noise and fire to push the animal toward the trap. Others waited in position, ready to strike once the mammoth was compromised. This level of coordination required planning, communication, and trust, qualities that separate human hunting from almost every other predator on Earth. Once a mammoth was cornered or immobilized, the actual killing method still had to solve a brutal problem. Mammoth hide was thick, and vital organs were buried deep beneath layers of fat and muscle. Simple stabbing wouldn't reliably kill an animal this large fast enough to prevent it from causing serious harm, even while dying. This is where weapon technology mattered enormously. Archaeologist Shea has studied the effectiveness of Stone Age weapons against large game, and his research suggests that thrusting spears alone were often insufficient. The real breakthrough came with the development of the atlatl, a spear-throwing device that dramatically increased both the speed and force of a thrown spear. Using an atlatl, a skilled hunter could launch a spear with significantly more penetrating power than a spear thrown by hand alone, sometimes enough to reach vital organs even through thick hide, especially when aimed at softer areas like the throat, underbelly, or eyes. Hunters likely targeted these vulnerable points specifically, aiming not for a single fatal blow, but for wounds that would cause the animal to weaken through blood loss over time. A mammoth might be struck multiple times by multiple hunters, then tracked for hours or even days as it slowly succumbed to its injuries. This wasn't quick. This wasn't clean. This was patience as a weapon, the willingness to wound an animal and follow it until exhaustion and blood loss finished what the spears started. The payoff for this enormous risk was equally enormous. A single mammoth could provide thousands of pounds of meat, along with fat, bone, hide, and ivory, resources that could sustain an entire group for weeks or even months in the right conditions. Archaeologist Olga Soffer has documented sites where mammoth remains were used far beyond food. Bones became structural material for shelters. Ivory became tools and ornaments. Hide became clothing and covering. Nothing was wasted because nothing could afford to be wasted. This is why mammoth hunting, despite its extraordinary danger, made evolutionary sense. The caloric and material reward from a single successful hunt could outweigh months of smaller, safer foraging. A gamble worth taking when the alternative was slow starvation through a brutal winter. Not every hunt succeeded. Evidence suggests failed hunts, injuries, and deaths were a real and accepted cost of this strategy. But when it worked, it didn't just feed a group for a season. It demonstrated something about human beings that no other predator on Earth could claim. The ability to defeat an animal 100 times their size, not through strength, but through planning, patience, and each other. You descend from people who looked at 8 tons of muscle and tusks and decided the odds were worth it. They were right often enough that you exist to read this sentence.